We've got some business to get to, and it starts off with the U.S. Senate. Are they coming to the rescue of the NCAA? Well, we've got 5 senators, Richard Blumenthal, Jerry Moran, Cory Booker, Chris Coons, and Ted Cruz, that met several times in recent weeks in connection with a potential bill. Now, the bill, if it moves forward, it's expected to have 3 major components. And these 3 major components are important because they basically help college football get back to some sort of foundation and structure, so we're not dealing with a lot of what we're hearing, for example, with the Nico Iamaleava situation. So the first would be a federal preemption of any state-based NIL bill. What that essentially means is the federal law will rule over state law. The second would be a declaration that athletes are students and not employees, which is interesting and key in all of this, and I think it's key for keeping the academic component as part of how they're able to participate. Third, a limited antitrust exemption that would allow the NCAA and major conferences to enforce eligibility and transfer rules without fear or liability. And that's probably the most important, because whether it's the NCAA, and it's interesting how this is worded, and major conferences, because the reality is the Power 4 conferences that exist control college football. That's the biggest breadwinner, moneymaker, however you want to phrase it. The NCAA cares more about the college basketball tournament. That's how they line their pockets. Mm-hmm. So the third piece is the biggest. Now, look, some people would suggest, hey, man, it's probably not a good thing for the government to get involved. Like, usually doesn't make things more efficient, usually doesn't work out well. But at this point, it feels like the schools are hesitant to take control. The NCAA is scared they're just going to get sued again. And with a 9-0 Supreme Court decision, you can understand that. So, look, universities could always unionize, and they can impose restrictions in this hypothetical world we're talking about. But the reality is it's probably tough to do. And so, look, if this goes through, I still think it will be tested in the courts. I still think there will be some players who feel like they are limited if there is antitrust exemption provided to the NCAA, because really that's going to limit some of these players and their ability to maximize their market value. So even though it feels like we're heading in the right direction and maybe there's a federal bill that's going to be passed to help calm this down, ultimately, remember, we've got Congress, okay, the legislative branch. They're the ones that make the bills. And then you have the judicial branch, okay? They interpret the law to resolve disputes and then ensure justice. So they will potentially have to see a case that's going to come about to decide whether or not it's just how this is being handled. At least that's my interpretation of where things are going. Either way, do you feel like this is a step in the right direction, VAR, or do you feel like this is only going to make things more messy?
I think whether it's in the right direction or not, it's still going to get messy, bro. I don't think there's any possible way to avoid mess, because it's almost like, what this feels like. I guess I try to give good analogies. I mean, maybe this is a good one, maybe it's not, but we'll see where we go. It's like heading into a body of water that can't handle the depth and the size of an ocean liner. But instead of plotting it out and planning and knowing right when to slow that cruise liner down so that you don't have any mishaps of it, getting, caught up into the bottom of the ocean because it's too close to the shore, they threw caution to the wind. And now you have a cruise liner that is all the way up on the beach and maybe even in parts of the resort that's on the beach, Q. So I feel like this has been so poorly managed and so poorly handled in the years prior. How long has this Ed O'Bannon case been going on for? It's been going on a long, long, long time. The minute that gained any type of momentum, the bodies that be, the universities, the NCAA, government, all these different entities that are connected to college athletics should have been figuring out what is the structure moving forward. So they are so far behind that no matter good steps forward or not, it's not going to be enough. And I don't know how long that time frame is that actually corrects, puts enough safeguards in place to stabilize. I'll say this: if you get to the point, if they get this thing to the point of where the TV dollars now start to, no, I don't even want to do that, because I just think that there's always going to be greed. There's always going to be people wanting more, and you just need the parameters and the different safeguards in place, the structure in place, so that this can be handled in a business manner. Stop saying that they're student athletes. They are student athletes, but you cannot sacrifice the employee aspect of this anymore. Like that sounds a little bit like disenchanting, disconnected, maybe. You got to accept the reality of it is that these guys are working. You worked when you played for Notre Dame. I worked when I played for Penn State. Anybody who has played a college sport.
I did work. I got an hourly wage at the Office of News and Information. And
you did more. You did more work.
Yeah, my off days. That's how I'd get a little bit of that driving money. Some people will call it pizza and beer money. I used to.
There you go.
So I used to use it. So we had a great little Italian spot on the south side of town called Bruno's. Shout out to Bruno's.
Shout out.
They used to have a buffet.
Oh,
and I think they charged like $8 a head. It was all you could eat. So I'd take the linemen there on Thursday nights, and we had a little setup upstairs. We had that Thursday night college football game was on, and so I would literally take on, and Ryan Harris, all right, who was my left tackle to this day, and for anyone who knows him, and if you see him, you can send this message to him. I would eat him under the table with chicken parm. I would crush him and eat more chicken parm. He would complain every single time that I must have fasted the entire day. I didn't eat. I saved up for this moment. I'm not going to tell him my secret, but I would crush him in eating chicken parm.
So y'all went with the big chicken parms or the little ones, and they gave you a whole bunch of them.
They gave
some of them they give you the big ones.
Yeah, they're little, but you got a whole bunch of them. And so I think I'd probably eat about 8 of those things.
See, I like those thin, big ones. Almost look like small pieces of pizza. That they're like just over the whole entire plate of chicken parm. That's like my favorite. But I get it.
I didn't mean to derail you. Go ahead.
No, it's all right. I mean, I just think the point is that there's so much that has to be done at this point that you're going to see a lot of casualties. You're going to see a lot of mistakes. You're going to see a lot of bad things happen before you start to see good things happen. And I just wonder how long is that going to take, and how much is it going to take to get college sports, more specifically in my estimation, college football, in a place where it's stabilized, because it's not stable right now. And a bill being passed, a couple bills being passed is not going to change a structure that isn't in place to keep this thing moving and running in a smooth manner without having young men connected to the game, maybe even coaches, maybe even universities, programs go unscathed in how things play out and pan out right now.
So a couple things that are interesting. You brought up the Ed O'Bannon case. So the Ed O'Bannon, I believe, it was the EA Sports NCAA Basketball 09 featuring a virtual UCLA player matching his characteristics. And that's really what I think drew his attention in wanting to file. So this is back in 2009. He initially filed this, right? I believe the trial started in 2014. And that is where the initial findings, and this is what gets really crazy, all right, if people care about this stuff. U.S. District Court Judge Claudia Wilkin. Now, that name should be familiar to people because she's ultimately who ended up finding that the NCAA's amateurism rules were unreasonable. And I believe awarded in the case of O'Bannon. It eventually was, appealed, and the Supreme Court declined to hear the case. But the reason why I bring up the judge, because it just so happens that Judge Claudia Wilkin is now presiding over the House NCAA settlement. So she not only has played a huge role previously in that O'Bannon case, but now she's handling this current case with the House NCAA settlement. And I believe they actually sent through last night some revisions to what the settlement will be. One of them being that there was a question about roster limits. It doesn't look like there'll be a change there, but they're still trying to iron out what the settlement will look like. What role, for example, collectives will have, and to what degree. Probably some issues surrounding Title IX still, which is not a lot of clarity on what that will look like. But the same judge, Claudia Wilkin, will impact college sports in a huge way forever moving forward. Now, again, going back to the 5 centers, the one nice thing is you've got people from both sides of the aisle. You have Democrats, you have Republicans, they're working together to try to find a solution. That's how government should work. Whether or not that'll last, we'll have to wait and see. My concern and my worry is it still doesn't ultimately protect the student athlete, because with these antitrust exemptions that would allow the NCAA and major conferences to enforce eligibility and transfer rules, it's all going to be in favor of the schools. It's going to be a similar structure, just with revenue sharing for the student athlete. And maybe people want that. But I'm kind of personally looking at saying, I'd rather these young men and women find a way of unionizing so they have a little more of a fair opportunity in bargaining for a collective bargaining, agreement with some sort of CBA. So they have better, for example, more fair pay, potentially, after they're done playing for these schools, depending on the eligibility limits. There's something on the table now for 5 years of eligibility. It used to be 4. It's one of the reasons why I feel like you kind of got to throw asterisks next to some of these stats, because when guys are playing college for 6 or 7 years and they have all these years of eligibilities that are counting for their cumulative stats, they're not all the same, folks. I hate to break that to you. Like, you can't look at a guy who's played college for 6 years and go, oh, yeah, look what he threw for. It's like, well, yeah, he played for 6 years. It's not quite the same. But the general point is, once they're done playing, hopefully there's some post-career player benefits as well at some point. At least that's how I would see it. I mean, the structure is going to be very similar to the NFLPA, at least for football, or the NBA Players Union as well. I would think when it's all said and done. I would imagine it's going in that direction.
Oof. It's just so much that's going to have to happen. And how does it happen? How is there any unforeseen, like if it were you, what would you think could be an unforeseen type of glitch or snag that could take place in terms of getting things where they're stable, a stabilized system? Like, is there another Ed O'Bannon case that we're not thinking about or seeing? I can recall back to the beginning when that came out and that filing took place. People were kind of shrugging it off and laughing at it, Q. Like, they weren't taking that seriously. And then all of a sudden it's like, wait. I can recall people, oh, he's a car salesman, Oh, he's broke, he needs money. I can remember the things that were being said about Ed O'Bannon. So it clearly stated or kind of established that people didn't see or understand it in the way of which it ended up unfolding and creating and causing to where we are today, presently. Is there anything else that comes up? Like, can you think of something that may be? That comes up. Yeah, no. I mean,
to me, it'll be surrounding around, I think, the educational component. That's where I feel like there'll be a sticking point. I think Title IX and the educational component are what's going to be tough to figure out. And people think it's simple, but it's not. I mean, and you've brought it up before. Semesters versus quarters, how a lot of those credits transfer, how they don't, if that plays a role in the eligibility of a player, how they go about figuring that out. I mean, Title IX, for example, I've said this before, we all know there's going to be revenue sharing with the House NCAA settlement, but we don't know how it's going to be divvied up. is it going to be equal for both men and women? So if you have, let's say, 20 million for round numbers, men's sports get 10, women's sports get 10? Or is that not going to be the case? Are you going to mandate or dictate to schools, how much they can spend on what sports? Are you going to, basically say, no, you have complete autonomy to choose how you want to spend that money? But you have to provide the same amount of opportunities for men and women in how you're constructing what they're doing to earn this, right? So there's all sorts of different ways this can be constructed, but I think also you could find issues with. But that's for someone smarter than me. I think it's a step in the right direction to see that there's a sense of urgency, at least from some entity, whether it's the government or anyone else for that matter. But I do still feel like it's a long road ahead before we're going to be able to find a solution for where we're at in college sports.